Man in the garden brought sin and sorrow and mortality on human beings, but God's going to teach us that at God's death, we are going to find comfort and rest, even though we are despairing. Hey everyone, I'm Rachel, and today on Crack Your Bible, we are going to be talking about Genesis 5. We finally made it after 2 months to Genesis 5. Now, I was really considering skipping over Genesis 5 because it is a genealogy. It is in the beginning, God created man, and you have Adam, and then it just goes on to list the names and ages of the different patriarchs leading all the way up to Noah. And I thought, people aren't going to care about this. It's just a list of names. But in my spirit, it was just eating at me like, no, you need to talk about Genesis 5 because it's important. Now, in Genesis 5, you have a list of people, men, from Adam to Noah, and it lists their ages. Adam at such and such age had this child, and then this child begat so-and-so at this age, and then he died at this age. And if you notice in Genesis 5, the ages are very big, like 900, 700, ages that we definitely don't see today. The short one was Enoch, which was 365 years, and you'll notice something special about Enoch. It says that he walked with God, and then he was no more. And Enoch happens to be one of two people in the entire Bible who still hasn't died. He never died. The other one is Elijah, who went up in a chariot of fire. So out of the entire Bible, including Jesus, there is only two people that didn't die. Why do we need this list? Why is this important to have a list of genealogies? Well, you see, the Bible's always trying to tell you something special, and there's so many different facets. Now, one is that we remember that the seed of woman is going to bruise the serpent's heel, that the seed of woman is going to destroy Satan. We know that seed of woman is Jesus, but how do we know that she's the seed of woman and not fully God when he comes down on earth? How do we know that he just doesn't shoot down on a cloud and he's walking the scene and he actually has no part in mortal man? Well, because we have a genealogy. So a genealogy, especially in the Old Testament, is there to establish Jesus's lineage. So we know that so-and-so begets so-and-so, 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 until we get to Jesus. And that's what we have. We have Jesus's lineage in the Old Testament, and then there's a 400-year period between the Old Testament and the New Testament where the Maccabees are ruling. That's where Hanukkah comes from. It's in this 400-year period where the Bible it goes dark. God doesn't speak to the Jews. And then Jesus's genealogy picks back up again in the book of Luke, and Luke was a doctor. He was one of the apostles. So in his book, he talks about Jesus's lineage. Now, we know that people don't live 900, 700, 600 years anymore. And I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around the Bible being true when you see these really crazy ages. Like, this is insane. Methuselah's, 900 something years old. How is this even possible? And I think that science will always back up the Bible. And we know that we have these humans, and we've seen their skeletons, and they have these super deep brow ridges. They are very small and hunched over. And we know that as you get older, your spine compresses. I'm sure all of you have seen old people where they're all hunched over. And what would that look like if you've lived for hundreds of years instead of 87 years? Well, we know that your ears grow bigger, your nose gets bigger, your brow ridge gets bigger. So I believe that when we see these Neanderthal skeletons, we're not seeing a different species of human. We're seeing the bones of these really old pre-flood human beings because we don't have any contemporary skeletons to compare. Like, what would a 900-year-old person look like? What would their skeleton look like? What kind of trauma would be on a skeleton from a person that old? And I think you would have the deep brow ridges, you would have different cavities being like the holes in layman's terms in your body. So yeah, I believe that the Bible is 100% true, and when you see these crazy numbers, you can't just say no, don't believe it. Now there's something also important, because Genesis 6 is such a huge story, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do, because people have entire ministries just centered around Genesis 6. That's how deep it is. But Genesis 6 is dealing with the flood, and you have these people in Genesis 5, and while they are righteous, like Enoch, they still live in a sinful world. And other than Enoch, they died. They had to deal with sin, and because of sin, they died a mortal death. And that's what the Bible is telling us. Like, these people lived. They are fully human. They didn't come out of Zeus's head. They didn't come down in a cosmic egg. They weren't born out of a lotus flower. They are 100% human, and they had to die because of Adam's sin. Now, all of them except for Noah lived at the same time. When Noah was born, Adam was dead. But everybody up to Noah, so Adam to Lamech, all lived at the same time so that they could have firsthand, person-to-person conversations about what actually happened at the Garden of Eden, which is really cool. Now, one person after Enoch, he had a son named Methuselah, who was the oldest man who ever lived. And Methuselah, his name means his death shall bring. Now, in the Bible, once Methuselah died, that's when the flood happened. So at Methuselah's death, it brought the flood. But there's something really cool that I want you to know. In the Bible, people are named for things that are going to happen. Names specifically have meanings. It's something that you want to put on your child. I know in my family, on my dad's side, all of us except 2 children have Bible names as far as my grandparents' grandchildren. We have Aaron, we have Abigail, we have Benjamin, Joseph, Hannah, Sarah, myself, Rachel. We all have Bible names because those Bible names have meaning, and it worked the same way in the Old Testament. So let me get my list for you. Now, my name means little lamb in Hebrew. Rahel means little lamb, which is like a term of endearment. So, like in English, we'll say, oh, she's a cutie pie, or she's a chick. So it's a term of endearment, little lamb. But there's something else. Now, we know that Adam means man. We went through this in Genesis 1. But let's go through everybody up till Noah. We have Adam, which means man. Then we have his son Seth, and that means appointed. Then we have Enosh. Enosh means mortal. Then we have Canaan, which means sorrow. We have Mahalalel, which means the blessed God. We have Jared, which means shall come down. And this is where a lot of people say this is when the Watchers came down. And that's going to be something different. Then we have Enoch, which means teaching. And in the book of Jude, it talks about how Enoch was somebody who warned people about God's judgment, and he was a righteous man, and he taught people about God. So his Enoch meant teaching. Then we have Methuselah, his death shall bring. We have Lamech, which means the despairing, and then we have Noah, which means comfort or rest. So Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. which means, if we just take their name meanings, man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down, teaching that his death shall bring the despairing rest or comfort. So, man appointed sorrow to mortals, but God's going to come down teaching that at his death, he shall bring those who are despairing, so mortal man, comfort, rest. And that's a picture of Jesus right there. So something really, really cool. I did another one about Jesus being declared God by the Romans. It was right above his head, and it really ticked off the Pharisees. I'm going to put a link up here about that video. But yeah, we're establishing Jesus's genealogy, that he comes from Eve, that he is mortal on this line. So he shares in the judgment for sin. That's why he has to be perfect. But we also see that all of these other people in the Bible are mortals. They're not like other religions where it's like, oh, and this guy appeared out of a crystal egg and was fed by monkeys and did all this other. Nope. They're humans, and they lived a long time, and then they died because they lived in a sinful world. Now, we're going to continue to talk about some more Genesis 5 stuff before we get into Genesis 6, but I would like you to like, subscribe, and share, and we are going to talk some more on Wednesday and Friday for our Crack Your Bible vlog, so I'll talk to you later then. Bye!